in my best Doug DeMuro. This is a 1999 Hyundai Sonata GLE Classique. It's a 2-litre, 4-cylinder, 5-speed manual. I paid $1,800 for this, and it's 25 years old. It's in really, really good cosmetic condition. It's got a couple of mechanical things wrong with it, a couple of cosmetic things, but everything works. It's the absolute base model. It's probably one of the ugliest cars I think I've ever seen, apart from a PT Chrysler. I've never done a car review like this before, but I thought, bugger it, I'm going to do one because I thought it'll be a bit of fun. I bought this so that my kids could learn to drive a manual. What for? Because no one drives manuals anymore. It's 2024, but what the hell. So I'll go through the car, I'll show you what it's like to drive, show you what the gearbox is like, the engine, the suspension, the braking, everything like that. The quirks and features, as Doug would say, and let's get into it. All right, baby, let's see what you've got. So you can see there, Ks are exceptionally low for a 25-year-old car. So what do you get on the inside? Well, you don't get a lot. You get a 5-speed gear shift with a really, really long throw. The clutch has got a very, very late take-up. For some reason, I'm so used to having on spin dials cold to the left and hot to the right, but there you have it. 4-speed fan. Does have air conditioning that works very, very well, thankfully. Everything's intact. It's even got a lockable gearbox. When was the last time we saw a lockable gearbox? It's got power windows, little knick-knack there, little center console for things there, which feels like it's broken. Cigarette tray, coin holders, cigarette power outlet there, and another one there. So two power outlets, which is not bad. I can turn one of those into USB. Rear demister, which does work. I checked that the other morning. Hazards, very exciting. And a very, very basic gauge cluster with a speedo very optimistically calibrated to 240 kilometers an hour. I've also got fog lights there, and I've got an adjustable dimmer there. And really, that is all you get. Oh, and you get a clock and a cassette player with a 6-stacker CD in the boot. How good is that? Oh, that didn't sound good. Here's our 6-stack CD player. Press that, it should come out. Oh yeah, there you go. So 6 CDs can fit in there. Remember CDs? They're like records, but smaller. And access into the rear lights for changing bulbs. Otherwise a pretty big boot. Now this I quite like. A full-size spare toolkit, crappy scissor jack, and some very, very basic tools that the previous owner claimed he had never used. And in there you get a star brace, a wheel nut undoer tool, and that is it. So that's the boot. It's a very basic car. It's got no ABS, it's got no traction control, it's got a driver's airbag, and that's it. It does have 4-wheel disc brakes. I believe I get ventilated brakes on the front, which is pretty good. Very low pads, very low. I don't have long to go on the tyre wear. And anyway, let's take this baby for a drive. Oh man, that is very, very heavy. And it's because it's a steel bonnet. Plenty of acoustic insulation up there, but it's a steel bonnet, not an aluminium bonnet, which I'm used to with some of my other vehicles. So the engine's actually looking pretty clean. So G4JP, I'm pretty sure that means that's the Mitsubishi engine, the 2-litre 4-cylinder double overhead cam that actually ended up in the Evo series of vehicles. So it's quite, this is 103 kilowatts at 6,000 RPM, and I think 240 Newton meters of torque at about 4,000 RPM. So not a lot of power. 103 kilowatts, what's at 145 odd horsepower, something like that. 0 to 100's claimed, round about 10 and a half seconds. and I'd believe it. It feels like it pulls for about that amount of power, but it's very, very basic. Down here we go, got an alarm for the really, really annoying immobiliser. As I said, that's really it. So close this up. I've got a few more repairs to do, and teach my kids to drive and get rid of this thing, the ugly duckling. And the other thing that I've discovered it has is a supremely annoying bing bong when the door is open. Oh, thank goodness for that. Righto, let's go over the seats. So basically you've got tilt for the seat back. You've got two adjustments here. One for the rear of the seat, it's a little bit hard to turn, and then this one here for the front seat. So despite all these adjustments, there's no lumbar support here. The seats are surprisingly unsupportive and uncomfortable. The other thing that you get is you get an adjustment here for tilt with the steering wheel, but not for reach. And the pedals are just not quite in the right position. And the other thing is, if you notice the angle of the gear lever here, it's like it's been designed. When they do a car swap from right-hand drive or left-hand drive to right-hand drive, normally they change the tilt of the shifter, and in this case they have not. So it just feels like it's neutral should be here, neutral is there. Now, like a lot of cars, this car has remote central locking, which is fabulous. So press this big fat red button. You get some chirps to wake your neighbours up at 3 in the morning, and you get a little red light here, and if that's off, you can start the car. But I've got to put my foot on the clutch, and I've got to put the key in the ignition, and the car starts, no problem. But if the key has been taken out and I now try and start the car, nothing happens. So you've got to then press the immobiliser again and again, foot on the clutch, and you can start the car. So basically the immobiliser is an utter pain to use, and what that means is if you're driving this, particularly if you're teaching kids how to drive a manual, which is the whole idea behind buying this car, you have to, and if the kids stall a car and they're inevitably going to stall a manual, then basically it's a real faff around, and they're nervous, cars behind them are beeping because no one's expecting people to drive a manual and stall a car these days. So it's just a bad design, and really, who is going to steal one of these anyway? Oh, by the way, I had to replace the button with a huge red button. This is because the original button was destroyed, so this is actually a button out of an old Foxtel remote I just swapped over. Anyway, you got to do these things. Righto, so what's this car, this 25-year-old car with only 113,000 kilometres on it, what's it like to drive? Well, to be honest, it's actually pretty bad. It's the gearbox is really, really long throw, so there's a really, really long distance between first, second, third, fourth, etc. It crunches. It's a little bit crunchy going back into third gear. Even if you double shuffle, which I just did then, it's still like the engine's not really responsive enough to heel and toe or to double shuffle, which makes it a little bit unpleasant on gear changes. Like it's 103 kilowatts. It doesn't feel too bad. The motor still feels quite lively. It doesn't have a lot of torque, 240 newton meters, something like that. 2 litre, multi-valve, twin cam, and it's fairly quiet, which is quite nice. It's a pretty beige mainstay, very, very boring, very drab, quite ugly car from 25 years ago. So it's really before the styling wars took off and angular shapes came back in. I don't know if that was because they couldn't press metal that way or whatever, but this is what you get. So it's not a particularly lively car, but it is fairly quiet. It's fairly economical. It uses something like 6.5 litres on the highway cycle and 9.5 around town, which is pretty good, to be honest, for a 2 litre. And but otherwise, it's absolutely got the barest of essentials in terms of creature comforts. So I've got air conditioning, and really that's it. I can choose between hot air, cold air. I've got a 4-speed fan only, and you know, I think my one of my other cars, a Renault, it's got something like an 8-speed fan as a minimum, and it's got climate control, and it's only a couple of years. And curiously, reverse is down to the right. Now, I will say the quarter visibility in this car is actually very good, so it's pretty easy to see. Getting used to that clutch. It's got a very, very high take-up point, which makes it a little bit uncomfortable to drive. So going up the gears is actually quite nice. No problems at all. Just that really, really long throw gearbox makes you feel like you're in a bus, but it's going back from even into 5th. No problems at all. Quiet. 4th, no problems, but going into 3rd, oh yeah, a little bit of a crunch going into 3rd. And even if I'm in 4th and I try and do a double shuffle, okay, that's a little bit better. So you can rev match, but you've really, really got to press the accelerator down hard to get a rev match in this thing, to double shuffle and not crunch your gears. So the suspension's pretty wallowy. I'd say the shocks would not have been touched. The guy I bought it from claimed he did all his own maintenance, which is always a bit of a worry from a 70-year-old gentleman. I think that means oil and oil filter changes and air filter if you are lucky. It's meant to have a timing belt change done at 60 to 70,000 miles, about 100,000 kilometers. That hasn't been done, so I'm kind of on a bit of a wing and a prayer here. If I do one, because it's not interference, I'm not going to slam the valves into the pistons, so that's less of a risk. Because with an $1,800 car, if you bust the engine, you throw the car in the bin. One thing I can't fault on this little Hyundai though, it has a really superb turning circle. Righto, let's take this beast for a drive at night. Look at that. Nice interior light, good old filament globe. Keep the seatbelt on because I'm in Australia. We don't like dying, don't like going through the windshield. Did you notice that? It's actually got a time delay. Here, let's see that again. Close the door. Look at that. It's got a time dimmer. I really like that. That's a very, very nice little feature. My Turbo TX5, the fastest front wheel drive in Australia at the time, had that. Okay, turn the stereo off, headlights on. So the cabin's actually not a bad place to be at night. So got good old halogen globes, got our dash lights here. They're obviously adjustable. If I can find them at night. There we go. And let's take off and see what this puppy's like to drive at night. Actually quite nice, and the cabin is really, it's comfortable. The seats are not particularly comfortable, but I think it's quite nicely laid out. I quite like the look of this this dash at night. The instruments are super easy and clear to read, and I just thought if we're going to do a review, we may as well do everything. And now good old horrible halogens. So used to LEDs these days, and high beam, low beam, high beam, low beam. High beam's actually not too bad, and that is what this car is like to drive at night.